think? What you think? Yeah. What you do? What you do? Woo! Oh. Ha. Yeah. Right. What you think? What you think? Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Peace and welcome to the culture right here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Folks, it's Friday, but we got a lot of great conversations for you. We definitely want you to join us. First up, let's talk about the fact that the House has passed the bill legalizing marijuana. Woo! Now it goes to the Senate, and we're going to see how that's going to work out. We'll talk about that. Plus, in the state of Arizona, in order to vote for the next president of the United States, you need to show proof of citizenship. We're going to be talking to Marvin Doc Cheatham, a voting specialist, to talk about why this is another tactic for voter suppression. We'll have that conversation. Also, the dilemma of voting for Judge Jackson. You have some who are saying, some Republicans like Joe Manchin is saying, yes, I'm going to vote to confirm her. And then, of course, Susan Collins, yes. But then Lindsey Graham came out and said no. And Senator Lisa Murkowski is saying, I don't know. We'll talk about the politics of the BS. And then later, let's talk about the latest development in this whole Will Smith thing. We're going to share with you what the producer of the Oscar, Mr. Will Packer, had to say about an interaction that Chris Rock had with the LAPD right after that big moment. So we got a lot to get to. Stay with us. It's the culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, good afternoon. So excited to be chatting with you today. So we have another set of great conversations lined up for you. These conversations, a lot of them are political, but I know that underneath of each political conversation, there are cultural discussions that we need to have. So I'm very, very excited, to say the least, about what we got lined up for you, folks. First and foremost, let's talk about the fact that the House has officially passed a bill legalizing marijuana. Now, in a moment, I'm going to be joined by my culture crew member, Bakari Jones, to give us her insight and analysis. But let me just break this down for you, folks. It's official. Now, this is not the first time that the House has passed a bill to legalize marijuana nationally. It's not the first time, but folks are saying, proponents of the bill are saying, hey, this is the best time to do it. Let me just break it down to you. Let me show you this. The legislation that is dubbed the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. They call it the MORE Act, folks. Passed in the House last year, but did not move forward in the Senate. And so, in addition to decriminalizing marijuana at the federal level, check this out. The bill would establish procedure for expunging previous convictions. Here we go. Take a look at this, folks. Previous convictions from people's records and impose a tax on the sale of cannabis products. The Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. Take a look. Not only will marijuana be legal if it goes through the Senate, and you know it's a numbers game once you get to the Senate. If all Democrats are on board, then with the vice president serving as the tiebreaker. But as of right now, it's gone through the first process. But there is an expungement act. There's an expungement element to this act, which will allow those who have been previously convicted of marijuana to get those charges expunged. Ooh, wow. And so this is a game changer here. This is a game changer. Now, it's been 10 years, folks, 10 years since Colorado went all in, because that was one of the first states to legalize marijuana. But can you believe it's been 10 years since that landmark legislation passed in the state of Colorado? Wow. I want to bring in my culture crew member, Bakari Jones, who is an activist, strategic planner, and doing some fantastic work in various elements of the community, to get her take on this. Because when I look at this act, I see this possibly, and this is one of the big things that Black legislators are advocating for. They're saying that, look, a lot of Black men in particular have suffered, have had charges, have had records, have had to serve jail time because of marijuana. And so this act will help to free up some of those young brothers, get them back out in the streets. And then the other discussion is making sure that they can get their records expunged and get them clean. So let's bring in Bakari Jones for this conversation. Bakari, good to see you again, sis. How you feeling?
Brother, I'm feeling good. Happy Friday, man. Thank you for having me.
Happy Friday. I want to show another part of this as well. I wanted to break down what this MORE Act is. Keenan, let's throw that second part of the act up. Check this out, folks. The tax would begin at 5%. This is how the MORE Act is going to be broken down if it's passed. The tax would begin at 5% and eventually increase to an 8%. Funding through the tax would go toward a fund to provide job training, mentoring, substance use treatment, legal aid, reentry services, and youth recreation programs. A lot of things that tax would bring in all of this money for that. It would also provide loans to help small businesses in the cannabis industry that are owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. And this is the summary of what the bill said. Owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. Bakari, this act could, like I said, it could be a game changer, especially within Black and brown communities. Do you see it to being that way?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the potential for it to change Black and brown communities is tremendous. And, in preparation for today, I saw a tweet that Senator Joe Carter from our great state of Maryland said, if you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, there's no progress. If you pull it all the way out, that's not progress. Progress is healing the wound that the blow made, which that quote is from Malcolm X. And she goes on to say, simply legalizing marijuana without investing in communities will impede equity. So I think that, my take on that is that, again, the legalization is one of the critical steps. And then we have several more that, again, I think it's been a constant sort of topic with us on Fridays. It goes into things being holistic and creating more of the wraparound provisions around this act that are actually needed to not only support the communities that have experienced this, or that have the potential to benefit from some of these taxes and some of the provisions, especially in terms of the loans, but to also start to repair some of the damage that has been done from the criminalization. So
right. And when we're talking about, and one of our loyal watchers, Janelle, checked in on our YouTube page and said, hey, the expungement portion is the real game changer. Maybe the tax revenue will appeal to the masses. The GOP will be bellyache since the big industry investors don't look like us. The expungement portion would be the big game changer. And look, let me just add to that, because let me go here on Twitter very quickly. Representative Ilhan Omar, who is out of the great state of Minnesota, she puts it out there. Yesterday, she tweeted that this thing should pass, but she was saying that 91% of Americans support legalizing marijuana. Then I saw a tweet coming from Representative Barbara Lee. She said, quote, a country where Black and Latinos serve harsh sentences while others make millions in profit from cannabis is unjust. Today, she said, I'm voting to end the criminalization of marijuana and begin investing in affected communities with the MORE Act. She said that. But she also threw out another tweet earlier yesterday talking about the fact that you had a little bit more than 90% of people would gain from this in terms of those who have already been penalized and already gone into the system. So this is a big thing. This is a big thing. What do you see as being the likelihood that it goes through the Senate at this point, Bakari?
I think it will make it to the Senate. I'm just curious. Sorry about the ambulance in the background. I think it'll.
No, you in the streets, Bakari. You in the streets. It's all good. It's the
Shout out to Greenmount. Shout out to Greenmount. I think that it'll pass. I think it's just a matter of where, honestly, like where we are and how comfortable folks are with being this progressive. I didn't realize that this the movement around cannabis, as you said, I can't believe it's been 10 years either from when it was legalized in Colorado, but it was, named, we're in the process now that I have learned is called the green rush. So I think that this is an opportunity for some of these senators to really be in a position to say that, they were leaders, they were progressive when it came down to the green rush. I think that, to the person who commented, I agree that the expungement is the most critical aspect of this as well. So I'm hoping that folks will just be on the progressive, the right side of these decisions.
Yeah, I'm hoping so too. And, I know here in the state of Maryland, there has been some discussion about moving forward on a marijuana bill, but they had delayed the vote here in the state of Maryland. And we tried to reach out to a couple of Maryland lawmakers and couldn't get them on today. But, I know that it might start a domino effect. Now, that's the other part about this right here, Bakari, because yes, it could be national, but states' rights, right? That's something that's one of the, I would say it's a progressive yet interesting dynamic of how our government works, where the federal government can say, okay, something is okay, but then states still have the right to say, no, it's not okay. And I think that is for a lot of constituents, that's just confusing as hell. They're like, well, if the federal government said it's good, then why isn't the state government, riding along with it? And so, now it will compel, state lawmakers across the country to have some very, very different conversations. And when you look at the dollars and cents of these things, and we're going to certainly talk more about this particular bill as it moves forward. But when you look at the dollars and cents, we know that Black and brown community members get locked up more, going back to what Representative Lee said. But then you have white dispensary owners that are making millions, right?
Yep. And
so now that level of equity, has to be, that gap has to be bridged. And I'm wondering, here's my big question, Bakari. If this thing goes through, how will they relax some of the red tape around Black entrepreneurs, Black cannabis leaders from cracking open and starting own dispensaries? Because that's the other part of it. I mean, there's a lot of money that could potentially be made. That's one of the big questions.
There's a whole lot of money to be made. And then, I think, again, when you compare, right, the green rush to the gold rush, there's, in the business space, we refer to the small sort of claim that you get when you are the leader of the pack as the, first mover advantage. And so we're talking about 10 years into the game, there are so many people who are already in this space. It's great that some of those tax dollars will be converted to loans, which would then, be provided to small businesses. But a loan is relative. You also have to have the collateral to, to back up the loan. So
right.
I see it as ace, and it's something that, ultimately I feel like it sounds good on paper, right? And
sure.
But how that's going to translate into the actual pockets of some of the small business owners, and whether or not that's actually going to have the famed sort of trickle down effect, I'm not as and I won't say enthusiastic, but I'm not as optimistic about that potential. When I think about things on a really grassroots level, it's kind of like you have to already have something to be able to leverage what it sounds like those opportunities sort of coming down the pipeline.
And then there's another part of this conversation, right? There's a huge part because it's not just about arrest. Mm-hmm. It's not just about expungement, which I'm glad that this bill will encompass. And then, of course, we know it's about the green movement bringing in that green dollars. Let's break it down, folks. Right now, it's said it is predicted that by 2025, in 3 years, marijuana sales will earn as much as, check this number out, Bakari, 23 billion United States dollars in the U.S. alone. That's green money. That's green money left on the table of Congress, right? 23 billion in the next 3 years. Mm-hmm. Now, if Republicans don't listen to nothing else, they thinking about that 23 billion. Mm-hmm. They see that. They know that's money on the table.
It's also jobs, right? And that the potential for that from an industry standpoint is tremendous as well. So that's why, for me, it's like, will these folks be on the right side? And I know, they're still sort of playing on the fear-based mentality that I think so many Americans have that, that I think is still a holdover from the rhetoric around the war on drugs, I think that now, there's so many people who, there's so much research about the ways that cannabis, hemp, all of the byproducts can support and help us being whole human beings living, in the midst of so much stress and chaos. So the potential, the positives that could come out of this compared to the negatives that have already come about from so many arrests and criminalization, I think are tremendous. So I really feel like it boils down to how so much of this is framed in the media, right? And whether or not, like I said, whether or not folks are going to feel comfortable enough being in a position of leadership to make some of those decisions.
And as we're talking about money and that the impact of that, my hope is if this thing goes through, if Black cannabis entrepreneurs and those who and other Black folks who are part of this industry are not just given the red tape of owning a dispensary is cut, but then you also have to look at the banks, the financial institutions of this country, right? Because if a Black man or Black woman walks into a bank and say, look, I need a loan because I'm starting this cannabis situation, right? This cannabis business. How do we start to make sure that the banks are on board? Because they hold the power. Yes, the government can say it's legal, but then you still got to go through the banks. This is something that we've been talking about with the great challenges facing small Black business owners. The rate of banks approving loans for small Black businesses is much smaller than they would for white small Black businesses. So you have, there's another hurdle that's there that possibly could prevent cannabis entrepreneurs from getting into the industry.
Exactly.
And I'm wondering, is that something that that government legislation can help to relax, or is that something that another group of people would need to advocate for?
I think along those same lines, it's like, what's the sort of maybe not governing, but the monitoring body around that tax percent, right? Like the tax percentage, right? I thought you put up the quote that mentioned it going from 5% and eventually going up to 8%. Who's advocating for it to go up to, higher, to keep it where it is? How often? Who's monitoring the funds? And who's monitoring the distribution? If the tax dollars are converted to a set amount, whatever that dollar amount is, that this is the amount of loan funds that are available, it really just becomes a matter of the bank being the sort of go-between from the dollars to the small business owner. So it's not necessarily, I guess my question would be, how much of that boils down to a ruling or governing sort of entity that's going to say these funds have already been allocated. We just need you to make sure that you handle the distribution. And I mean, I think that what we've seen in terms of the housing market, we know that there's so many additional racist practices, sort of embedded into banking. So I don't see, I think that I'm following you, Farajii, in terms of the elimination of the red tape and the, minimizing at least of some of that institutionalized racism as well.
No, absolutely. And speaking of racism, check this out. Another fun fact about this whole issue, marijuana arrests account for 43% of all drug arrests in the United States.
Wow.
Nearly half.
I didn't know that. Wow.
43%. The U.S. makes 600,000 marijuana arrests on average every year. 43%. So a lot of times, folks, outside of your traditional crimes, right? Raping and murder and robbery, you have a chunk of those arrests on people possessing cannabis, marijuana. And a lot of times, it's us. We are the ones that are penalized. We are the ones that are getting harsher sentences. We're the ones that feel the brunt of the disdain from the police department, which is another institution, Bakari, that you got to have a conversation with on a national, state, and local level. I know in Baltimore, for example, State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, when she said, and she follows a trend of a number of state's attorneys across the country, a growing number, that they're not going to prosecute possession of marijuana. The same way they used to 10 years ago or 5 years ago. But when you have that many arrests, and we know that with policing is all about numbers and quotas, right? So now, of course, the police didn't like that because now they're going to have to actually change their whole strategy, change their focus on who gets arrested. I mean, this thing, that's what I wanted to start this conversation off, Bakari, with just a broad stroke of the discussion before we get into the ins and outs of the bill and all of that. I wanted you and I to put it out there, like all of the different questions, so that way people can have conversations. The question about banking, questions about policing. How does that impact states' rights? How does that, like all of these things, the economics of it. Let's look at all of the big pieces that are on the table to determine like what is the best course of action. And I think the biggest part of this whole conversation, it has to include the citizens. It has to include Black people. We absolutely cannot be absent from the conversation. We can't, because we're the most impacted, for one. And two, You know, we understand everything from the criminal justice system. We understand the ups and downs of policing. We understand what it means to be criminalized. We understand every dynamic of this. And so we need to really be at the center of the discussion, of the conversation, because there's an old saying, Bakari, that those who are closest to the problem are the best ones that know the solution. If all of these are problems for us as a community and as a people, then we are the ones that should be consulted about the best solution for it.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting. The other fact about this, as we wrap up this conversation, is the U.S. spends $3.6 billion on marijuana arrests every year.
That stat is starting. I mean, the number of arrests is staggering, 600,000.
Yeah.
But to see that 3.6 billion with a B, I mean, where do you redirect those dollars? Where do you redirect those dollars, right? So for the folks that are proponents of defunding the police, where can 3.6 billion dollars be reinvested into our communities? And then the other thing I just want to chime in, I recently learned about the difference between a small business and a micro business. And Baltimore has almost three times the national average of micro businesses. I'm not sure how that number fares out as it relates to small businesses, but one of the major distinctions in that is that a micro business is 10 employees or less. A small business can be up to 1,500. So I think a lot of times when we hear small business, at least myself, I'll speak for myself, I always have a tendency to think of a mom and pop, right? Like a really small team of people. And that could be the case sometimes when people are referring to a small business, but other times a small business could literally be over 1,000 employees and you could still be considered a small business. So yep. I also just want to throw that into the conversation because at least for myself, when I think about small business, I'm thinking about the little guy, the littlest, guy or person, right?
Yeah.
But that just to me is also something that's interesting. When I think about those tax dollars, we frame it in a way that says small business, but it may not be a micro business. It may be a small business, which could still, relatively speaking, be a huge player in the industry. And again, are Black folks going to be included or locked out of that particular financial space?
Big question. I mean, there are so many questions on the table. Look, let me just tell you, like I said, we're going to keep our eyes on this particular bill here on the culture. As this thing moves along to through the chambers, we're going to get some new voices on to discuss, all of the big questions, to try to address some of these big questions that we have, and really the implication of this. Most likely, by it being 2022, this is going to end up on some ballots either in November. I see this ending up on some ballots in November for a lot of states, since there are currently 18 states in the United States that allow recreational usage of marijuana. So this is going to be a big ballot question either this year, or we can definitely believe that come 2024, in 2 years, this is going to be a big conversation for the presidential election. And we definitely need to be there. We need to be there. It's a lot of questions, but we're going to try to work through all of these questions. Bakari, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, we're going to switch gears. Speaking of votes, Arizona, the great state of Arizona, the governor there, Mr. Ducey, is giving the Arizona voters a doozy. Yep. Requiring proof of citizenship in order to vote. We're going to be checking in with Marvin Doc Cheatham, who has served as the former president of the Baltimore chapter of the NAACP, and he's a voting specialist, to give us his analysis and insight about this latest tactic to suppress the vote in Arizona. So stay with us. A lot coming at you in the second 30 of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Holding no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, we're talking now. We're going to switch gears and talk about the voting situation in the state of Arizona, where Governor Ducey has has signed a bill that requires proof of citizenship in order to vote for the next president of the United States in the state. Let me just share with you this measure that was passed by the governor. It was passed into law earlier this week on Wednesday, and it requires newly registered voters to provide a proof of address, which could have a disproportionate impact on students, older voters who no longer drive, low-income voters, and Native Americans. Take a look here, folks. Take a look at it. Proof of citizenship. This could affect a disproportionate impact on students, older voters who no longer drive, low-income voters, and Native Americans. You're talking about 4 groups of people who could possibly be turned away from the polls as a result of not meeting this requirement. Here to talk to us a little bit about this latest move by the governor and the GOP legislators down in Arizona. It's Marvin Doc Cheatham, who is a voting specialist, and he served as the former president for the Baltimore chapter of the NAACP. Doc, good to see you, dear brother. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Good to be seen, and as they say in the hood, not viewed.
I hear that. Doc, you've been dealing with voting for a long time in terms of understanding the dynamics, understanding the laws and everything. But have you ever seen something like this where you need to show proof of citizenship in order to vote for the president of the United States?
Well, let me say first at the outset, thank you very much for having me again. I'm
You're
really
welcome.
honored. Let me also preface it by saying I am not a Supreme Court of the United States expert, but I have served as the first Black president of the Maryland Association of Election Officials, and I have been rated in federal court and in state court as an expert witness in the field of elections.
Come on.
Let me say at the outset that what was done by the Republican governor of the state of Arizona, and even some of the attorneys that I've been in communication with in the last couple of days, they will say what was done by the governor and their legislature will not pass Supreme Court muster. It is in total violation of even what this conservative court has sent out so far as guidelines. This is not only a residency issue. It's a constitutional issue. Is you're questioning African Americans, Black, Brown, and I don't know whether the proper term is Hispanic or Latino, but it's basically it's really as fragrant as it could be. It is gerrymandering and every kind of negative thing you can think of in voting. That's what this bill actually does. It's not going to stand the courts. We need to have the courts, whether it's the NAACP, the National Action Network, the American Civil Liberties Union. It needs to be brought back in court immediately, because many of the learned attorneys in the field of elections will tell you it's not going to cut the mustard. You cannot demand residency, and then you're going to have to be able to prove that you live where you say you live. It's a clear case of really trying to cut down on the number of votes. But folks, you need to know this. Arizona has a racist history no less than 100 years. Less than 100 years.
And so, Doc, when we look at something like this, I'm looking at those the demographics that were laid out in this piece in terms of who's going to be the most impacted. Older folks, students, low income, and Native Americans. I'm hearing all Black folk. I'm here. Yep. You know what I'm saying? I'm here, except for Native American. We got Native Americans. I'm part Native American, so we Black. You know what I mean? But I'm hearing darker people of the state of Arizona are going to be pushed away, especially our seniors. And you have been a huge advocate statewide and nationally around the issues that of senior rights and the rights of making sure that our elders have a say in everything. So when we hear that, and then someone pointed out, well, we can't even forget, my man Chris said, we have a lot of homeless people in Arizona too. Don't forget about them. So when you're talking about that, you're talking about basically what? Clearing the voting rolls of all of those people to get
They said at the outset, what I got coming from Arizona, at a minimum, 200,000 people will be immediately affected by not having the documentation that's required of this new law. That's even before you look into who is affecting. Automatically 200,000 people are affected. And I don't know whether you know, I do a new radio show here dealing strictly with seniors, and we are the largest voting block of any block. And believe it or not, this is going to affect them as well, because it requires residency proof. And we're saying we don't know what civil rights group is going to come to the forefront. But let me say this, because this may be a little controversial for you. But if this President Biden does not do what needs to be done, this is going to be a continuance until there's a new president. And that is, yes, we commend him that he finally lived up to one of the 10 promises that he promised to give us. He's failed out of 9 out of 10. But one of the things that we have to say, coming from the Black community, you have to, Mr. President and Ms. President, have to increase the numbers on the Supreme Court by at least 2 people. Otherwise, what has been done by the Supreme Court in the last couple of years is turning back the hands of time, not to require pre-clearance on any issue dealing with voting rights. It's basically saying you're now going to get away with all the discrimination and all the racism you've been doing for the last 100 years. We're going to put you back to square one, and we're going to start all over again. And I'm saying, Mr. Biden, and you Black Democrats, and yes, I am a Democrat, but I'm embarrassed that we are not talking about increasing the number of Supreme Court folks. We've had a major turn back of the pre-clearance issue dealing with voting rights, And that's going to go in the negative if we don't stop it now. And I'm saying, yes, Mr. President, you did good in finally taking 2 years almost to finally nominate a black, but we need you to nominate 2 more people to kind of balance the Supreme Court.
Marvin, Doc, I don't know if I don't want to be a bearer of bad news, but I don't foresee out of, okay, he's one for 10. I don't see those other pieces coming together just yet. With about 2 years left, a little bit less than 2 years left in his term. The other part about this too, Doc, is that fact that GOP lawmakers are also looking at doing some type of similar move in the states of Mississippi, Idaho, and other states that have proposed new identification requirements. This is going to be, and this is a great concern that I have, that going into this November election cycle, and then of course going into the presidential cycle in 24, that we may start to see a wave of states that have GOP controlled states that may put this type of requirement on the people and pretty much disenfranchising great numbers of potential voters. How should the constituents, how should the citizens respond to such an assault on the exercise and the right to vote?
Well, I would say first and foremost, it's imperative that all the civil rights groups and the folks fighting for freedom, justice, and equality drop your buckets exactly where you are. No matter what city, no matter what state, no matter what county you're in, you have to look at what's happening in your particular area. And you know, because you're a Democrat, because you're an African American, you cannot necessarily look the other way. Here in the state of Maryland, I guess the Democratic Party got caught with their hands in the pickle jar 2 election terms in a row. They have been found guilty of gerrymandering a map that not only protected white males, but protected Democratic white males in the absence of African Americans getting a chance to increase their numbers. I don't care if you live in the state of Maryland and you think that map is not a gerrymandered map, and I'm not talking about white folks and Democratic folks, I'm talking about against black folks. 1/3 of the population in the state of Maryland is almost African American. There should be a possibility of electing 3 African Americans to be in the Congress. But what the Democrats did, I'm calling names, I'm too old to think of anything else but call it like I see it. Right now, they have the maximum number that they can possibly get 2 African Americans coming out of the state of Maryland, because the Democratic Party got caught with their hands in a cookie jar again and basically drew up a map to protect Democrats and cut out the opportunity for 1 white Republican male to get elected. And the judge said very clearly, this is a gerrymandered map. The only thing is, we got black radio show talk show hosts who will not call it because they're friends of the Democrats that created the map. They got friends and they're afraid to call them out. Well, I'm calling the Democratic Party in the state of Maryland out, especially the blacks. How did you allow us not possibly getting 3 members of Congress to be African American by their mere population? There are 3 major areas that should enable us to elect 1 more Democrat who is an African American, or he could be a Republican, or could be a she. But I'm saying Baltimore is a city that needs to drop their buckets where they are. How do we have the majority population of African Americans living in the city of Baltimore, and the largest part of Baltimore is the Western District, and there's no early voting site for West Baltimore? And that's because we got black senators and Democrats going along to get along, and the injustice is being perpetrated in front of our eyes. We have to drop our buckets where they are and call it for what we see. If you see racism, if you see good old white boy plans, you got to speak out about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to bring my culture crew member, Bakari Jones, back into this conversation. Bakari, what's your question? What are your thoughts about this this issue of proof of citizenship in Arizona?
Absolutely. First, I just want to say, hey, and peace to Doc once again for being on.
God bless you.
Thanks to you, brother. It's good to see you. I guess, you know, my thought, you know, the whole time that you were speaking is just from your perspective, you know, unique within Baltimore, within Maryland, as it relates to dropping our buckets. What does that look like from an offensive strategy standpoint? I think the last few weeks, Farajii and I have been talking about the sort of L's that Democrats have been taking. What does that look like for us to get a win in this particular space?
Well, I would say I'm looking at two people right now. One, if not both of them, need to run and take.
Don't do it, Doc. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Every time, Doc. Every time.
Don't do it. No, it ain't taking his time for nothing. Yeah. Don't put it out there. Y'all need to run, Doc. I'm called to do this work that I'm doing right now.
No, y'all got to do. We need y'all to do a little bit more. I got elected officials. I represent one of the largest communities in West Baltimore. I got a United States Senator we haven't seen in 15 months. I got a member of Congress that we haven't seen in 15 months. I got a state senator we haven't seen in 15 months. I got 3 members of the House of Delegates. We just saw one this past month, but the other 2, we haven't seen them in 15 months. I got a city council member that does not know what it means legally to live in a food desert. I got young Black folks, and I'm not talking about no white folks. I'm talking about Black folks. I got young Black folks that don't have a clue who they're representing and why they're representing them. All they know is they're making money. They got a title behind their name, but they haven't done a darn thing to help us in our neighborhood. And if I had the opportunity, and I really shouldn't say this, but I really need to give them a Will Smith backhand.
Wow. I mean, it's just gotten to that point right now. And I know that we kind of making light of the situation, but I know, Doc, that you've been doing this work for years and advocating on many fronts, but I'm getting to that place already. I think I'm starting early with my level of frustration and disappointment, because what I'm seeing here is a weakness that has permeated into every element of leadership. And I think that the whole strategy of us waiting until something big and dramatic happens, that's a dead play in the playbook to me, Doc. That's dead. Like the Democrats can't be on the defense all the damn time. And whether you're talking about nationally or locally, you can't always be on the defense. When the Republicans are attacking, boom, here it is, boom, here it is. And we just like, well, you know, we want to try to work it out and do that. Man, nobody has time for that. When the clock is ticking, when elections are coming, when the people are upset and frustrated, and I'm talking about Black people, white people, Latinos, people, I mean, you know, we want to see change and we want to see legitimate change. And what we're seeing at this point, Doc, is that you got these voter suppression tactics that are being used across the country in a lot of these big populous states where our people living in. You know, I have family down in Florida, for example. And in Florida, I mean, they just creating just like a cluster of just disaster and chaos for Black people, for brown people, for people of goodwill. I mean, it's just going crazy. Texas, same way. We can go to the Carolinas. Now we got Arizona. Now we got Mississippi. I mean, these are urban centers where Black people are currently moving to. And I always tell people that before you move into a neighborhood or before you move to a new state, check the politics of the government, of the state lawmakers. If the politics don't work out in your favor, you may want to think that move through just a little bit more.
I would agree. I'll give you, I guess, a quid pro quo. A lot of people watch the Oscars that you saw the other day, and you saw unfortunate incident where I think we need to use it as a teaching tool for our young this is what you should not do. This is what you should not say. But at the same time, we have to question the very foundation of what we're getting involved with. You know, I tell folks I haven't looked at the Oscars in years. And that's because when I saw that Denzel did not get an Oscar for being Malcolm X, and I didn't see Diana Ross get an Oscar for being a Lady Day, that told me one thing. I'm letting white folks and black folks, they're going along to get along, be happy that they put on their nice suits and they're doing what they can. But as Malcolm said, you're being used, you're being hoodwinked, you're being bamboozled. And I'm saying that's what the Democratic Party is doing, has done, and will continue to do if black folks keep going along to get along. State of Maryland, you should not have only 2 African Americans in the Congress. There should be at least 3. I make it very simple for you. Prince George's County is an area. Baltimore City is an area. Eastern Shore is an area. And if you look at the data, I can prove the data to you very clearly. They have the numbers to substantiate 3 members of Congress. But the good old boys that are white and a Democrat protected themselves, got caught with their pants down, gerrymandering the map, and now they're back in court again. And now we're trying to figure out, is the election for the state of Maryland going to be moved back again? Because if the Black Caucus of Maryland really wanted to be men and women of color, they would challenge the map on the basis of race. Forget the good old boy Democrat Republicans. They need to challenge that map on the basis of race.
Let me just say this. We got like 30 seconds on this, Doc. You brought them up, the Congressional Black Caucus. How do we get them engaged and on the front line of this issue?
Replace them.
Damn.
The biggest detriment that we had dealing with the HBCU case in the state of Maryland, there was one filed in the year 2006. And for 13 years, our biggest hindrance wasn't the governors. It was basically the Black Caucus not even speaking up. It took them 12 years to even say anything. Just think how much money, how much funding these institutions, we're talking about Morgan, Coppin, Bowie, and Eastern Shore, just think of how much more money they could have already had if the Black Caucus did what they needed to do. It took them 13 years to wake up. And I'm saying some of us don't have another 13 years. I would say 85 if not 90% of the members of the Black Caucus do not deserve to be reelected.
Wow.
Doc, we're gonna have to stop it right there. But I mean, I'm just saying, just for the interest of time. But it makes I'm seeing how people chatting about this, and it's speaking to a sentiment that a lot of people, and I think a lot of Black folks in this country are feeling. We don't want to, and I know many people they've gotten upset with me, Doc and Bakari, because I'm like, look, the vote. Yes, it is a privilege. It is it could be a tool of power. But our ancestors, let me be very clear, our ancestors did not say to vote in every single election to your own detriment or against your own interest. Our ancestors wanted and had fought and died for us to vote using the best of intelligence, but to vote for our interests. If an election or if candidates on either side of the aisle don't speak to our interests, why should we keep voting for them? I'm talking to an election specialist. He's the man that, I mean, seriously, that does not make sense to me. They don't speak to our interests. I mean, they have a track record that don't speak to our interests, but we still chastise people because they don't vote. When people are using their critical thinking skills to say, but are they really representing what I stand for? Do they believe the way I believe? And I think a revolution has to happen. It might start at the ballot box. We know that they have started there before, but I'm saying a modern revolution, there has to be a change because we can't keep, and as you said it, Doc, we can't keep go along to get along thinking that something is going to change by doing the same thing. Because as I've said before, I think that's the definition of insanity. I think that's the definition of we want change, but we're doing the same damn thing over and over again. All right, Doc Cheatham, thank you so much. You know I got to bring you back, brother. I'm going to have to bring you back. So I appreciate your time today. Marvin Doc Cheatham, former president of the Baltimore chapter of the NAACP, and he is a voting rights expert. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's switch gears. Not moving away from voting, because this seems to be a common thread in today's show. But there is a dilemma of voting when it comes to Judge Ketanji Jackson. I'm going to talk about that dilemma, and you make your judgment for yourself on how things will go. We'll have that conversation with Bakari and our other culture crew member, Shaquaya McKenzie. So stay with us. A lot to get to in the second hour of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome to the second half of today's show. This segment, we're going to continue to talk about voting, but in a different respect. I want to bring culture crew member Bakari Jones into this really quickly because I think the last segment, I'm still reeling from what Doc said in the last segment. I don't want to just rush through it just yet. But it seems like every time you on Bakari on Fridays, something said. But I'm looking at the responses that we got in our chat, and so many people are just saying this. It may be that time, and I know that this could be a shock. This could be very shocking for some people to hear. And folks, this Doc Cheatham is a man who has been doing voting election work for years. I've known him personally for years, and he understands the dynamics of election integrity. But we're at a place right now, and I think, Bakari, we're really at this place in this country where we're seeing all of these things being done to stop Black folks, stop brown folks, to stop marginalized communities from going to the ballot box.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're still being told the same rhetoric, the same mantra. Don't worry about it. It's going to get done. Like, I'm not seeing something. I feel like we're living in a Black Mirror Twilight Zone reality here.
Mm-hmm.
Like these Republicans are legitimately suppressing the vote, stopping the vote. And it's like the Democrats, we just slow. And then, you know, the black politician,
the
black politician. I mean,
well, you know, it's hard to say the benefit, right? But I do feel like if anything positive can come out of this level of frustration that I feel like we are collectively experiencing, I think it is. You know, that's why I asked Doc the question, what does the offense look like? Because I'm like, we are against the ropes. What does the offense look like?
Right.
You know, in this space, you know, one of the things I read in the article that you shared was about the Republican push to tighten the voting fuels to additionally further the doubts about the integrity of the democratic process. So it's just to also do, or maybe not easy, but it's common for us to think, well, there's a reason that the Republicans want to suppress these votes, right? So if we know that, then perhaps that can kind of galvanize us to vote even more aggressively because of the fact that they want to suppress us, right? They wouldn't want to suppress us if there wasn't something to be lost by us voting against them. But I think, you know, when you kind of, again, all these layers that are coming through today, I think when you consider the additional layer and just the additional fatigue that this adds, you know, I think that it kind of goes back to everything that we've been talking about on Fridays, which is just this long strategy that the Republicans have against us. So just to kind of see the level of, I think of it as a sort of, again, just wear and tear to just sort of exhaust the Democrats and ultimately Black and brown voters predominantly. You know, let's just exhaust you. You know, we'll move the line so many times, so quickly and so sneakily that maybe, you know, you'll just be disenfranchised and too exhausted to compete.
I mean, it can't be just exhaustion. I mean, it you know, when you know this, there's a principle in community organizing where you have to, one, you have to kind of measure where the sentiment of the people are, right? You got to get a better understanding. And then two, it's like, once you know that the people are in a certain space, that is sort of the consensus that you need, the will to build some momentum to go in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying this because, and I'm really blessed that we have this platform and that we have this show, because I really want us to really think critically about the role, not the role, but the place that we are currently in this country. We are losing. And I mean, because I don't know how else to say it. We are losing.
Mm-hmm.
The lie that Black people are making progress in this country.
Man.
When behind closed doors, rights are being demolished, right? Our voices are being diminished. We are losing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our history is being erased. We are losing, folks. This is you know, in community organizing, you can't go into a community with a wish list. You have to see the landscape exactly as it is in order to make change. You got to start with reality. The reality is we're losing.
Mm-hmm.
And each day, something about Black people, the interests of Black people are being chipped away. Each day we are told to wait. each day we're being told your day is coming. Each day, another piece of legislation in some state, in some county, is being used to block us. We're losing, folks. We're losing. Like, that's the reality. But when the country is in its greatest need, whether it's wartime, whether it's for us to a national emergency, we are the first ones that the government come to for help. But we are the ones that are losing. So you come to us for help in your agenda, but when we come with our agenda, I can't help you right now.
We'll get to it.
Look, I gotta go to let me check in with let's talk about this next piece, because this dilemma of that's facing Judge Ketanji Jackson, where there are a number of Republicans who are trying to figure out whether they should move forward with voting and confirming her as the next Supreme Court justice. We also joined by Shaquaya McKenzie, the also culture crew member, who is an activist and educator as well. So we could bring Shaquaya in, but let's talk about this dilemma that is facing Judge Jackson. So we already mentioned, folks, early in the week, Joe Manchin is a part. Joe Manchin said of West Virginia said he's on board with confirming Judge Jackson. And then you also have Susan Collins, Senator Susan Collins, saying that she's on board. Now, yesterday, Senator Lindsey Graham, I'm not surprised or shocked about this, Mr. Flip-Flopper himself. He's saying that no, she doesn't fit the qualification. Let me just share with you what Lindsey Graham said. Now, man, I'm glad I don't live in Lindsey Graham's state, man. I'm telling you, my foot be so far up his ass. Look, here's what he said. He said, here's where we are at in 2022. This is Lindsey Graham, folks. The only person qualified to go to the Supreme Court as an African-American woman is a liberal. You can be equally qualified as a conservative, but you need not apply because your ideology disqualifies you. So he's more concerned about party rather than qualifications. Your party loyalty is going to kill this country. I mean, you talk about, Bakari, when we talk about democracy, you know what's underlying. It ain't the war on drugs. It ain't terrorism. It's this loyalty to parties that is killing this country. This joker says, I shouldn't use that terminology because he is a public servant, but I'm just so upset. The only person qualified to go to the Supreme Court as an African-American woman is a liberal. This is what he's saying. He's saying, like, that's a problem. You couldn't equally be qualified as a conservative, but you need not apply because your ideology disqualifies you. As if, here's the crazy part. Your ideology, we all have an ideology. She's a black woman. She's going to have an ideology, but you're like, your ideology isn't good enough to be on the Supreme Court for me. Therefore, you don't get my vote. Not to say that her decisions in over 550 cases have been strong. She has a 2% reversal rate on her cases. But he don't like that she's a black woman who is a part of the Democratic Party. Did you see that foolishness of questioning? You remember that, Bakari, talking about, did you see Judge Kavanaugh's? Did you see his hearing? And then, I mean, come on, man.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
And this is why people look, the Pew Research has a number of studies about this. There's a reason why people have such a low view of government in nowadays. it's beyond, it's below 40%. People do not trust government.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what polls some of these lawmakers are looking at, what stats, what data they're looking at, but people do not trust. You have a majority of people in this country who do not trust government versus those who do. And if you got 60 to nearly 70% of the people in the country who don't trust government, you can look it up, folks. I'm not making these numbers up. You got 60 to 70% that don't trust government. Then how the hell do you stand with your job?
I don't know, especially when it comes to Graham being, initially voting for her in the previous position.
Right.
Even, it's like, well, even he hasn't been on the, been consistent with his voting or his support, I should say, of Judge Jackson. I think in this instance, it's wild to see, like, again, as we just, in the last segment, just to talk about the level of strategy, not to double back, but it's kind of hard not to, related to the law in Arizona. My understanding is that part of the attempt with that law is that the body of the Supreme Court has changed in such a way that maybe there is I know Doc was, adamant about saying that, the legal folks that he's in community with, saying that it can't pass, but to even think about the makeup of the Supreme Court changing so much that law does have a chance, it kind of just shows the importance of having someone who is liberal in that role and in that position. So it's astounding to me that he could change, that he could support her in one instance and then speak out against her so viciously, to be honest, just viciously in another, in that level of contradiction, to me is kind of astounding. And I don't know that he addressed his earlier support of her in a way that would allow him to stand in any sort of integrity.
Well, you know what? You speak of integrity. This is the same man who was, remember back in the day, when Trump first talked about running for president, he didn't even like the president.
Right.
Then next thing you know, he becomes a lapdog for President Trump. And then he switched up on him and become an enabler, and he becomes his like I don't know, his chief, what do you call them, people that they go out and surrogate. He becomes his number one surrogate. And I mean, so his word really it doesn't mean anything to me, but to some people it does. And I know that they're going to be like, oh, if Lindsey Graham, and this is why it's important, Bakari, that when we talk about national or local political issues, that you understand you don't have to understand every decision that they make, but you get a better sense of their track record.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, what kind of individual that you're dealing with. And I know we talk a lot about politics on this show and in other shows and everything, but look, it's unfortunate that you have these individuals in positions of power and influence and have access to resources, because some of these people ain't worth a damn.
Mm-hmm.
They just ain't worth a damn. Let's just keep it real, folks. I'm so sick and tired of, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, Doc, like some of these people, you just be like, you know what? You need to get you just need to get out. Just get out of it. You ain't worth nothing. You don't do anything for anybody except for yourself. And when I see Lindsey Graham, that's the type of politician I see. Oh, he just politicized until he can get his next come up. So that's the situation with him. Now, here's the situation with Senator Lisa Murkowski, who is a Republican that's undecided. Keenan, let's take a look at this quote from the New York Times in the dilemma she finds herself in. It was said that for her, a vote to confirm Judge Jackson could potentially help her cobble together a coalition of centrist Republicans, independents, and Democrats to make up for those on the right who may have abandoned her because of her frequent defections from the party line and from Mr. Trump. She's the senator out of Alaska. She's up for re-election. She's been a senator in Alaska for at least 20 years, and she's up for elections. And President Trump is backing her opponent.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, when he, some people are still going on his word. So So they're not trying to show her any love, and so there is a possibility that she might lose her seat in this year's election.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a result of that, she's on the undecided. She doesn't know. But as you can see, is that if she decides to do it, she's got to go against the wrath of Trump and the wrath of his followers, possibly gaining some Democrats and some independents and some other voters. And this, again, going back to it, this is the politics of BS.
Mm-hmm.
That you're going to vote against your conscience and the interest of the American people. I remember we talked about this earlier this week, Bakari. 2 out of 3 people say, there was a poll that was done, and I don't remember the poll off the top of my head, but it said 2/3 of the American public thinks that Judge Jackson is qualified and should sit on a seat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do you reconcile that with the fact that if you as a candidate and as a representative, you see that the American people are like, man, just put her on the seat, but you got to go against the American people, which is in direct contradiction of your role as a political representative, because you're trying to side with a party that goes against the very voice of the people. That's why democracy is in decline, because now your party politics it takes precedence over your national interest by the American people. Please don't talk to us about Black people, about American interest, and about being patriotic. Please don't talk to us about that. Please miss me with that. Please don't come up to us and say Black people aren't the most patriotic or y'all are un-American. Please stop that madness. Please. But that's her situation. What's your take on that, Bakari?
Man, she is interesting to me. You know, reading about Murkowski, not knowing, much about her political career, her history in Alaska, but learning that she was willing to vote her conscience with, I believe it was Kavanaugh. She voted against him in 2018. So just to know that it's a possibility, right? There's a reason that she's still on an undecided list. I think that, the other mention in the New York Times article was that there is no right for her to shore up. So when it comes down to her potentially being able to cobble together enough votes for her to win her reelection, that she's not going to be able to include the right in that. So it's interesting to me to contemplate whether or not she'll be voting from a politically strategic position. I mean, and all of this is going to be, political strategy on some level or another. The New York Times article specifically mentioned that she was willing to vote her conscience when it came down to voting against Kavanaugh. So I am hoping that her voting against Kavanaugh and for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson those two are on the same side of the coin. So those are my initial thoughts. And I wish that I was able to see just more data about the potential groups that could come together to reelect her. And for me, it just boils down to whether or not she's the Republican that would, again, just vote more logically and outside of those pretty harsh political line or party lines, as you kind of mentioned earlier today.
Yeah. Look, let me just share with you very quickly, Bakari, what people are saying. JC said, and I think it's an interesting question. So, JC, I appreciate you asking this question and sharing your thoughts. He said, why is it that we have to beg Black folks to run for office and vote? Listening to this show, I have not heard any solutions of what we as Democrats can do to fight against these dictators in power. Well, let me just tell you, and that's an excellent question. And I'm not taking it as a shade or anything. Let me say, and if you want me to tell you what to do, here's what I think. We need to organize. We need to stop putting hope into the Democrats in the Republican basket. Did y'all hear me when I say that? We need to organize. if you want to continue to put fire under the ass of any Democratic representative, then do it. Because guess what? Politicians don't work on just goodwill. A lot of them don't. They know the difference between right and wrong. They know the difference between what's moral and immoral, but they need to be fired up. And the fire needs to come from us as the constituents, as the citizens, right? And if there's a particular issue that we want to see moving forward, we can't expect them to be the advocates of that issue. If it's voting rights, then we need to be out there organized, pushing and advocating for voting rights every step of the way. Every step of the way. If we get out of thinking about Democrats and Republicans as the title and start looking at this as people that we have elected to do a certain job, if they don't do their job, it's just like in our respective spaces. If somebody don't do their job, what do you tell them to do? Either you give them some written warnings, right? If you're a supervisor, you know all right, first I'm gonna give you a verbal, then I'm gonna give you a written, and then next thing you know, your ass is out of here, right? That's how we do it. You give them like a 3 strikes you're out type of situation. We got to do the same thing. And the issue I think that we have, JC, is the fact that we don't know our own power. And we still want to believe in the old narrative that if we send somebody to Washington, then we don't have to think about these things. This is 2022. When we send somebody to Washington, we got to walk right behind their ass to make sure they get to their office, they go to the chambers. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, figuratively speaking, we got to constantly be on top of that. And that, Bakari, I think is the big reason why people don't want to get involved with politics, because there's a responsibility that's attached to being a citizen. And we don't want to burden that responsibility. Our minds are on, in just this week alone, this show included, we've talked about Will Smith, but we don't think about the other parts of things that are happening in the world. The fact that we may be engaging in war, the fact that we have the anti-lynching bill that needs to have more substance and not just be symbolism. I mean, there are a number of things that are happening that we can get involved in. So we can't get distracted. There is a responsibility in being being a citizen of a sovereign nation. You don't let up on those representatives. If they're representing your interests or my interests or our interests, then we got to make sure that we are there every step of the way. And if it's not you personally, that's why we organize. Everybody takes a little bit of the process of the journey. All right, I'm going to be here for the first 6 months. You be here for the second 6 months. You be here for next year. I mean, that's type of thing. There has to be a strategy. What do you do? How would you answer JC's question or sentiment, Bakari?
I mean, that's deeply understood. You know, I mentioned it today, and I feel like I always want to take into consideration level of collective grief that Black people are experiencing all over the country, but specifically in the U.S. And I think that along those lines, and just sort of understanding and holding space for that level of grief, I think we have to just sort of come to grips with, as you mentioned earlier, right? Just what's actually going on, right? What's the lay of the land? Where are we from an organizing standpoint? But I think it also comes down to prioritization. You know, you mentioned strategy, which I think is going to be clutch. But I think it also comes down to prioritization. You know, we talked about last week the potential to impeach Clarence Thomas and the actual time impediments associated with that, right? So I think some of it becomes like, what are our short-term priorities? What are our, long-term priorities? And then what are the things that we can accomplish in between that? So I think that part of that strategy, means deeply understanding our priorities. Yes, we understand this is important, but from a strategic standpoint, this is the first priority that we are tackling. And I think the other part, and I have a great friend of mine that reminds me that, some of American politics is intentionally challenging to sort of wrap your head around the rules and the regulations, the functions. So I think that, I'm a huge proponent of media being used to distill some of these concepts and ideas down so that we could, across multiple platforms, from a social media standpoint, be able to say, look, this is the TikTok version of the short-term priorities. This is the IG version of the, our short-term priorities across the board, again, using this platform to be able to distill down these small bites. And I think some of that, and I go back to like the sort of exhaustion and fatigue, because it's difficult, I think, Farajii, to your point, to hold all of those pieces. But if you think of it, I'm running the ball just this little lane. That's my ministry. It's just right here in this box. That's what I got to do.
Right.
I think it becomes a lot easier when you start to break it down into those smaller chunks. So that's my feedback.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, Bakari, we got to talk about Will Smith again. But here's why. Because the producer of the Oscars had something to say and add to the larger conversation. Mr. Will Packer shared his experience of what was said between Chris Rock and the Los Angeles Police Department when he was smacked by Will Smith. We'll share what Mr. Packer had to say. And, of course, I got my last word. Stay with us. It's The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all. All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
final segment, I want to talk to my culture crew members, Bakari Jones, and I'm thinking we also are joined by culture crew member Sequoia McKenzie, who is an activist and educator, as we've been talking about this issue of Will Smith and the big cultural moment that happened on the Oscars. It was just like 5 days ago that we saw Will Smith making that slap that was heard around the world. And a number of folks have been talking about it. Of course, we've talked about it here on this show. But each day there seems to be another major development or a new detail that is being revealed in this situation. So just recently, the producers of the Oscar, Mr. Will Packer, a black man, who went on ABC News to talk about what was said between Chris Rock and the Los Angeles Police Department after that moment. Check out what he had to say.
You know, I probably have a different perspective on that, TJ, because I was in the room and I know a lot of those people, and so it wasn't like this was somebody they didn't know. It doesn't make anything that he did right, and it doesn't excuse that behavior at all, but I think that the people in that room who stood up for somebody who they knew, right, who was a peer, who was a friend, who was a brother, who has a 3 decades plus long career of being the opposite of what we saw in that moment. I think these people saw the person that they know and were hoping that somehow, some way, this was an aberration. He's going to stand on stage and maybe Chris Rock comes from the back and says, we got you all, you know. I don't think that these were people that were applauding anything at all about that moment. And all these people saw their friend at his absolute worst moment and were hoping that they could encourage him and lift him up and that he would somehow try to make it better.
Smith apologized to the Academy and his fellow nominees during his acceptance speech, but not to Chris Rock, something Packer says was a missed opportunity after striking Rock.
Do you wish Will Smith had left after that? Do you wish he did not remain a part of your ceremony?
I think what many of us were hoping was that he would go on that stage and make it better. It couldn't be made right in that moment because of what had happened. But I think we were hoping that he would make it better, that he would stand on that stage and say what just happened minutes ago was absolutely and completely wrong. Chris Rock, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. That's what I was hoping for. I felt like he was gonna win, and I was hoping that if he stayed, he said that.
Art imitates life. I look like the crazy father, just like they said. I look like crazy father, just like they said about Richard Williams. But love will make you do crazy things.
If he wasn't going to give that speech, which made it truly better, then yes, because now you don't have the optics of somebody who committed this act, didn't nail it in terms of a conciliatory acceptance speech in that moment, who then continued to be in the room.
But just an hour before Will Smith's Oscar win, the 94th Academy Awards was...
So that was a little bit of what the Oscars producer, Mr. Will Packer, had to say about that situation. Now, further on in that conversation, Mr. Packer said that Chris Rock and the Los Angeles Police Department had a conversation. And it was Chris Rock who insisted that charges will not be filed against Will Smith, nor also he insisted that Will Smith should not be removed from the theater. The Los Angeles Police Department had shared with Chris that they had a couple of options on how to deal with, as Will Packer described it, and they used the terminology battery, how to deal with the battery of this case. But Chris was dismissive. And essentially, he told them, look, I'm fine. I'm good. I want him to stay. So bringing me back to you, Bakari, because there have been so many people around this issue. I don't know if this new interview with the producer of the Oscar, Will Packer, if that changes anything. Does that change the tone of the conversation? If it adds to anything, does it make? I will say that and this is from Will Packer, if Chris Rock was there and he insisted, and that's the language that Will Packer used, that Will Smith is not removed, and he insisted that he was not going to file charges, then big shout out to Chris Rock, man. Big shout out for just being a brother enough to be like, hey, look, this man don't need all of that. He doesn't need to be, hauled out of here by the LAPD. He don't need to be we
don't need to make a bad situation any worse. We don't need to make the bad situation any worse.
Shout out to Chris Rock for that. So I thought that was a big moment. I think people needed to hear that. I think people need to know the dynamics of this situation. And I know this has been like an all week type of conversation, but that part to me resonated the most. That Chris Rock did not want to take away even the moment for Will to win that Oscar, for him to not be there. Even after that was, that's and I know that's a humbling situation, man. Again, I can't big shout out to Chris Rock for thinking about the black man side of the conversation. What were you going to say, Bakari?
I am inclined to agree, Farajii. I feel like, the ripple effect of what that would have looked like from I'm astounded that this has been a week-long media sort of spectacle, but how much larger that would have become with the imagery of the Will Smith, right? Like this kind of icon, as Will Packer mentioned, 3 decades plus in the game, as essentially kind of characterizes this gentleman, what that would have looked like for him in the media, and the collective impact of that, and again, just how that would have framed Chris Rock against Will Smith. So I agree. Shout out to him. I also think that it's a plus also for Chris Rock for in this instance, he now kind of gets the shine or the credit for remaining composed when he could have, sort of taken a retaliatory stance. Yeah. But I feel like I have to say, as a black woman, for me, I think to kind of get to this point in the week and to not have a lot of this conversation go back to centering black women, to me, that's like on a Friday recap. That for me is still honestly the most astounding part of this story. And I want to just also quickly mention, the clip of Will Smith saying that he was, being characterized as the crazy father, and to just know that, Richard Williams was not, I don't think that violence is something that, I think we're all capable of it, obviously, yes, but character-wise, it doesn't seem like that was something that was how he would have conducted himself. So for me, I am glad that Chris Rock is in that space where he was able to just kind of put a stop to it. Of course, I wish he had stopped before he made that joke out of bad taste, especially, someone of his caliber. That would have been my hope going into it. But I think that for him to kind of just say, look, well, I'm gonna contain it, and to just, I don't know whether or not that was on Chris Rock's mind, but we kind of know now that the potential that the Academy has to, press whatever charges or whatever penalties, against Will Smith moving forward, for Chris Rock to say, hey, at least I'm not going to contribute to that portion, that anything that happens at this point is essentially kind of the consequences Will Smith's going to reap of his own actions.
Yeah, and the other part of it is, Chris had a show in Boston this week, and he got a standing ovation. He said they said he got 2 standing ovations from the crowd, and he was just like making a joke about like, wow, y'all really like to see me. And he was like, I'm not going to talk about the Oscars. He said he's still processing all that has happened. but that he did not want to go into it, and he'll share his thoughts about it later on. But I do think that it speaks to it. I think Chris Rock is knowledgeable enough and to know he's heard the course of the conversation over these past few days to understand the gravity of what this moment means for the idea of protecting women, two successful black men kind of going back and forth on a world stage, the impact that it has on the arts, the overshadowing of the fact that there were a number of black artists that were celebrated and honored that night that did not get that moment that they were expecting, and all of those things. So I think he's been handling this absolutely well, considering. Because if he was from Baltimore, we don't know
what it would have looked like.
It would have been a different situation, But no, I think he's handled this. And I implore people to go back to Roland talked about this, and he said he's Team Will and Team Chris. Folks, listen to what Brother Roland had to say about the fact that we don't fall for the okie doke, that we don't fall for being in a space where we're choosing between two successful black men to try to figure out, because that only adds to the division of the community. And I think that, my hope is that as this situation kind of fizzles out a little bit, that we do come together, because I've seen that it just serves as another divisive tool, not just between black men, but also between men and women, black men and black women. And it's like, we don't need to get divided. We don't need to get divided. Some people look in Chris Rock's past and past things that he said and say, yeah, you haven't always been the most vocal, advocate of women, or of women's expression. And so we can go back and forth, but at this point, two black men are in the spotlight for something that has been very, very sad. That's the only word I can use to describe it, Bakari. This is a sad situation. There are no winners. Nobody is coming out on top. I mean, it's just a sad situation. And I think that we have to be mature enough to handle it as the people that looked at it, and then just try to find a way to be supportive of each. Because at this point, that's what the culture needs. It doesn't need any more division. It needs our unity.
I agree.
Yep, there it is. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. Bakari, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for checking in as always on Friday. And I look forward to our conversation. Shaquaya couldn't make it. She was kind of in between things. So, God willing, next Friday she'll be back with us. But I appreciate you as always for holding it down with me. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, brother.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, my last word, stay with me. It's The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape, with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back. I want to, as we've been having a fantastic week, I want to just give you my last word this week, as always that we do on Friday. And my last word is something that I was reading, and it comes from the minister. He talks about the question of handling opposition. He said, how do you handle opposition is the mark of your maturity. How you handle opposition is the mark of your maturity. And one of the things that comes to my mind when I read those words is that the fact that we're in this place that we're always being opposed. We are seeing this right now in a political space. We are seeing this right now as a global leader. We are seeing this right now within our own communities, that we're always being opposed by someone or something that is keeping us from the goal that we're trying to make. The question becomes, how do you handle that? How do you deal with that? And I think that it's important that we look at that part of marking our maturity. If we want to make any type of progress, then we're going to have to grow up. We're going to have to, what they say, put on your big boy clothes, big girl clothes, and grow up. Because at this point, we are being opposed on so many different sides, from so many different sides, on so many different levels. And the opposition that is coming against us is forcing us to acknowledge who we are. We can't just wait into the sidelines anymore. First, let's deal with the internal self. Like, we can't be in a space where we're internally not able to deal with opposition. It is through opposition that we find out who we really are. That's how character is built. That's how we understand where we are. When you losing is sometimes a better experience than winning, because you know what you need to work on. You know where you need to improve on. Same thing on the outside of ourselves. When we are dealt with so many different opposing forces, then we have to know, where do we stand? And we've taken some lumps. As a community of people, we've taken some real lumps. And guess what? Sometimes we just allow ourselves to just kind of go into the corner and don't want to be seen, don't want to be heard, don't want our presence to be felt. But is that the most mature way of dealing with the opposition that is coming to us? When I think about the Will Smith situation, I'm thinking about, what were some of the imposing forces in that situation? What would make a man of his stature, of his character, to just go off the way he did? He has to deal with those opposing forces within himself. We got to deal with the opposing forces within ourselves, because why? These opposing forces are so heavy and they carry such a great burden on us that it puts pressure on our thinking. It causes us to feel afraid. It restricts our will to want to move forward. It restricts our desire to want to be better. And so we are being called in this particular moment. And I know many folks are probably thinking like, man, Farajii, you always seem to be on this line or this train of thought where you're going hard on the Democrats, you're going hard on the Republicans, you're talking about the system. Because why? The system has made us feel like we were children. It has made us to lose the natural independence that's required for people to say enough is enough. The system has made us feel like we don't have what it takes to be great. The system has made us feel like we have to put all of our eggs in another person's basket. And I'm telling you today, that is not the case. You want to know how great you are? then you need to have opposition. You want to know how tough you are, you need to have opposition. You want to know how big your vision is, then you need to have opposition. But you can't attain none of those goals unless your mind is ready to accept it, unless you are truly mature. You have grown in the mind, the heart, and in the space to take on those things that you want. That's both on an individual level, and of course, that is facing us on a collective level. We need to be able to handle opposition. And right now, we're not handling it the best way that we can. Therefore, our growth is stunted. We are in a space of arrested development because we're not mature enough yet. I've seen some of you on the chat that have said that it's time for us to wake up. We're still dreaming. We're still asleep. We're still hoping and wishing upon a star. And that puts us in a space of being immature about who we are and what we bring to the table. So this opposition that we're seeing right now, you want to know the biggest mark of maturity is not seeing opposition as a threat, but to see it as an opportunity for us to be better. I'm in this space right now, folks. I know that we can be great. We have all that we need. We have what it takes. We have undergone some of the greatest, if not the greatest trial that a people have ever undergone, politically, socially, economically, educationally. This is not the time to think like little boys and little girls. This is the time for us to stand like the men and women that I know we can be. And so each day, God willing, we're going to use this platform to challenge us to grow, challenge us to think deeper, challenge us to think broader, challenge us to be better. That's what we're going to use, because we know that the opposition doesn't care about our feelings. The opposition doesn't care about our morality. The opposition only wants to overcome and take over all that we have. And guess what? I don't know about you, but it's not time for me to give up just yet. As long as we have air in these lungs, as long as we can open our eyes, guess what? It's another day, another opportunity for us to become older, wiser, and better. That's the maturity that we need in this moment. And that's the maturity that is going to overcome the opposition that we have to face each and every day. So I thank you. That's my last word for this week. Folks, I thank you so much for being a part of the conversations. I thank you so much for your support this week. Next week, we got a number of fantastic guests that we'll be bringing on. This is the time for us to tune in, to listen, tell your family and friends about the culture, let people know, continue to support Black Star Network. Look, I am forever grateful to Brother Roland, Big Brother Roland, for giving me a space and an opportunity and a platform to be on this wonderful network, to be among these positive, powerful hosts. So this is an opportunity for us. This is not a threat. This is an opportunity. This is not opposition. This is a place and this is a chance for us to grow. We want your support. Make sure you check us out at blackstarnetwork.com. You know where to go. You know how you can support us. This is Black-owned media, unapologetically Black, not at the detriment of other people, but we want to start to build a base where information is shared, where ideas are discussed. This is the place to do it. This is the place to do it. And on the culture, God willing, we'll have more conversations where you can state your thoughts, where you can share your ideas. And if we're not on the same page, that's okay. But we need to say something, because we don't need to be opposing each other each and every time we open our mouths. We need to find ways to come together. And I hope that you find that space, that path here on The Culture. I thank y'all so much for y'all support. Thank you so much for checking in and making Black Star Network a very powerful and viable medium for your news and information and conversation. All right. I appreciate that. Monday, we'll be having some very special guests. I want to talk about next week what's going on in California and the reparations movement. Let's continue to talk about all of these bills like the anti-lynching bill. Let's continue to have conversations about this marijuana legalization of marijuana bill. all of these things. We'll bring you up to date, but we can't do it without you. So thank you for tuning in. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong, stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk on Monday. And stay tuned at the 6 o'clock hour for Roland Martin Unfiltered with my big brother, Roland Martin. Talk to you soon, family. Peace.